And those moments are the precious moments that you remember the rest of your lives, aren't they? The ones that are so much more amazing than the expensive French restaurant you went to or the great view from the Eiffel Tower. Just that woman and her son taking a total stranger in and making sure we had a good time.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. And I have a very interesting guest today who has done a lot of things. And I am very curious to find out a lot more about him. He is an executive producer, has had multiple Emmy Award nominations. He is an author. He has traveled to over 70 countries. He is very, very interested in history and goes back in time a lot. And I think we should start talking about and find out more about my guest. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Neil Laird.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
As I already, we were texting a little bit before we recorded this, and I said I have been stalking you because I get informed about the people that I speak to, and I'm very, very impressed with everything you've done. Where does the interest for history come from?
It goes way back. I went to school. I've always been enamored of filmmaking. I always thought I was going to do movies, theatrical movies. And I went to film school in Philadelphia. Thinking I'd go off and become, the next Martin Scorsese. And then I moved to New York City with my bachelor's of art degree in hand. And then I became the poor schlub just sitting on a grip truck, making sure no one stole the equipment at 2 a.m, with a walkie-talkie in my hand, a long way from the top. So, I got a bit disillusioned with that clearly, but also too, there was so much time in between calls from work. You freelancer, you wait, and then you don't work for 3 months. And of course, I'm a young kid, just out of school, so I was broke, and I couldn't afford to live in New York and go to any real places. So I started hanging around the New York Public Library. And for whatever reason, one day, out of sheer curiosity, I picked up a book off the shelf about ancient Neolithic history, about the rise of pre-civilizations. Nothing I got in my small Catholic high school in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was a very kind of small-minded town, and we didn't talk about anything beyond the Bible in many cases when it came to history. But here I'm holding this book. I knew nothing about the ascent of humans. And so I read the book and I became so fascinated, I resolved to teach myself history through books. It was free. I had nothing to do. I was waiting for the phone not to ring. So I kept going back to the New York Public Library over and over again. And then I got to ancient Egypt and the Middle East, and I got stuck. A penny dropped, and I became absolutely enamored of the culture of Egypt and Mesopotamia and all those early cultures. And I don't know why, something just snapped, and it's still a fascination with me today. So essentially, that changed my life because I changed my career trajectory. And then instead of going into or trying to become a filmmaker in New York and rise, I went back to film school for documentary filmmaking with the idea of trying to get back to those places and see if I could, make that a career. And I ended up backpacking through the Middle East for about 8 months and went to Egypt, Iran, Syria, Jordan, Turkey, and Israel. And my head was in the clouds. And I've been chasing that high. You probably noticed like that first trip when you're somewhere and you realize you're just floating. I think it was in Eastern Turkey for me. And I was somewhere looking at some ancient Hittite ruins. And it dawned on me, and this was back in the 90s, before internet and before phone calls. And so no one knew where the bloody hell I was. And there I was wandering around some ancient ruin all by myself with nothing but a passport and maybe a lonely planet in hand. And I never felt freer. I felt like, oh my God, I literally am floating on there. How can I capture this and put it in a bottle? So I came back. I changed my career to documentary with that in mind. Like, I want to get back there and spend more and more time in this part of the world because something about it is calling me. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Amazing. They say that the person that you wanted to become, the Martin Scorsese, also exists in a parallel universe. So probably making films.
Exactly. He could be in the ancient ruins in Turkey right now, and I could be making, Goodfellas. Who knows how it could have gone. But I definitely found my calling, I think, because I had no interest in studying documentaries as much, or little interest. But it was that desire of blending history with travel that impelled me. And then I went to film school. I went to Chicago and got my master's of fine arts in documentary. And by that point, I was so enamored of Egypt that a friend of mine who's Egyptian's father was on the Antiquities Board of Egypt. And that's a big plum thing because to even shoot in Egypt, permits are hundreds and hundreds of dollars a day. But because his dad was on the Antiquities Board, I got a permit for free. So I made my thesis film about the restoration of the Great Sphinx of Egypt. And I borrowed school equipment, which you weren't allowed to take out of Chicago. You couldn't even take it to Lake Michigan because if you got sand in it, they'd be upset. I came back and I handed my tripod in, it had sand in it. And they said, "Did you go to Lake Michigan?" And I lied and I said, yes. I was really in the Sahara Desert shooting the pyramids of Egypt, but I didn't tell them that. I made about Egypt and I sold it to television, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Amazing. Well, there's sand on Lake Michigan as well. It could have been from there.
That's
Who
why the lie
knows?
worked. They didn't do any DNA samples or anything.
But you touch on so many things now, because and you brought me back myself because how we lived or how we traveled or how we worked before the internet. Because I was a tour guide in my 20s, and I just look back sometimes and I think, how did we do it? How did we arrange? I mean, we used to go out every night and we always used to meet up with friends. How did we arrange? I didn't have a phone in my house.
Yeah, you look back and me too. I think back. It's like, how did I find these people? How did I get from the bus station on the edge of town to that one hotel in the middle of it? How did I negotiate a fare? How much did it cost? But in a way, and it's nostalgia clearly creeps into this when you've been doing it a while. It was that challenge. Part of what I love so much, of course, and I'm sure any traveler, you did, and anybody else does early on, is you have to step outside of yourself and you realize, oh, this is Neil Laird, not the Neil Laird of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but the Neil Laird in the middle of Syria, trying to find a bloody hotel in the middle of Damascus at midnight. How are you going to respond to that, Mr. Laird? So you have to kind of be on your toes and you kind of have to fly by the seat of your pants. And boy, I miss that. Once you settle down and become, part of the fabric of society, you get your corporate job, you're not asked those kind of things anymore. And I think that's still that wonderful lore and pool. I'm still kind of looking to be a bit uncomfortable when I'm out there. Not I mean in a way where I'm worried about safety or anything, but something where I gotta, use my wits. And it's harder and harder today because all you got to do is pull up your phone and Google a map and find out where you are, and 12 restaurants will come up, and you can Google translate into Turkish or whatever. So while it makes life easier, not quite as fun.
No, I agree. I really, really agree. And also, we needed a lot of patience. I think patience is one virtue that has completely disappeared. And I think people are much more angry than we used to be because we knew that we had to be patient. We couldn't just click on a button and find out some things. It was just different, but good old times. Let's talk about how did you feel? How about Iran? What was your fascination with Iran?
Well, being an American, of course, Iran is always kind of closed off. It is one of those countries where you simply could not go to. So therefore, it had the appeal of doing something that the Hendersons down the road when they go to Disney World would never consider doing. So there's that sense of the other, which was wonderful. But then when I got into Iran, and this was, my God, this was the late 90s. So, I'm sure things have changed exponentially. But even then, the first thing that took me on was like, this was not some primitive culture that was left behind in the world and they're living in the medieval time. This is a very vibrant, very modern culture, very sophisticated. The people that I met were so embracing. And that's not just Iran, that's all of the Middle East. The first time I traveled was right after the first Persian Gulf War. 91, 92. So just having an American in Jordan and Syria, in Iran and all those places, they were just so happy to say, oh, you are not your government. You don't see us as the bad guy and vice versa. So the Iranians, as well as all the other people I met, were just so embracing, and they wanted to show around, make sure that I had a great experience and that I got around. They wanted to show me things. Iran didn't have a lot of the hard sell that Egypt does because I think they're not used to that kind of tourism. So it was very laid back then. I mean, in a way, it was a bit stuffier, I would say, because obviously the oppression of the Islamic government you could feel. So there were no restaurants or there's no bars. There was no sense of outward fun, no dancing, but the people still did that stuff. I went to parties behind the scene. They just closed the blinds and then had the party. So it was just a wonderful experience. And again, it just told me one of the other things that is so obvious to particularly anyone who travels, certainly an American, that what we are told that part of the world is like isn't great contrast to what it really is.
Oh yes, I totally agree. And hospitality in all those countries is a very, very big word. And I think because we are here in Cyprus, we are very far down the Eastern Mediterranean. We are geographically part of the Middle East. And I think our biggest worry is always that somebody could leave our house hungry. You know, it's
Yeah.
important to have a lot of food.
When it was in Iran where, no, no, it was in Turkey, Eastern Turkey, on the way to the Iranian border. I got screwed up because, of course, there was no timetable, no internet, and I got in the wrong train and I missed my train. I was stuck in a very small town in Eastern Turkey. And it was late at night and I didn't know where I was going, or it didn't really have any hotels. And then there was this old woman locking up her shop, and she sold like watermelons and fruit or whatever. And she saw me; she could tell that I was lost, and of course didn't speak in English, and I spoke no Turkish. But she told me to stay, and then she came back with her son, who spoke rudimentary English. This couple took me home and they brought me into their house and they feted me. They went out and got a big meal for me. And they came back with lamb and all this wonderful stuff. I don't know how much it cost them, and I wasn't asking, but they took me in and they made sure that I left this small town with a smile on my face, and then took me to the train and made sure I got on the next one. It was just so wonderful. And then on the way out too, I looked around the house and I read, always the big question with the Westerners, is like, how do you repay hospitality? And the easiest thing is, well, you give them back cheese, you give them a tip. But that felt wrong here because they were not looking for money. So I realized that she was complaining about some of the watermelons hadn't come in or something, and she didn't have any to sell. So I went down the street and found a couple others, and I bought them and I gave them to her so she could put them in her shop. And the smile on her face was just so exuberant. It was just a little gift. It only cost a few piastres or whatever, but it was a nice way to thank her. And those moments are the precious moments that you remember the rest of your lives, aren't they? The ones that are so much more amazing than the expensive French restaurant you went to, or the great view from the Eiffel Tower. Just that woman and her son taking a total stranger in and making sure we had a good time. And I asked myself, would that happen if it was my town, if that was a small town, Pennsylvania, and someone from Turkey was wandering through lost?
They would
Would
call
Mr.
they would
Henderson
call the
take me?
police.
They would call the bloody police.
Yes, this is unfortunately has turned into a very, very sad world. And I think all this propaganda against the Middle East is such a shame because, in my opinion, it's one of the most beautiful part of the world.
I agree. And the culture, again, as I say, I'm going back to Turkey to write my next novel. And I love the Eastern Mediterranean, where you come from too. That speaks to me. And that's why it's not just the culture. I love the ancient history there. But nothing is more beautiful and soothing than the landscape itself. It's not just the people, but my God, it's gorgeous to just sit there and watch a sunset over a Greek island. And, it's so inspiring.
It's biblical because, I was, when you go to Jordan, we have a 40, 50 minutes flight from here to Amman, from Larnaca to Amman. And Jordan is definitely one of my favorite countries in the world. And you just feel like you're going through the Bible.
I love it. Petra is, and I went into documentaries and I ended up shooting all over the world. So I remember going to Petra as a backpacker and then going back again several years later to shoot a History Channel special. And I kept thinking, now I was the jaded filmmaker, and I thought that, it wouldn't be impressive anymore. And walking down that wadi and coming to the library in Petra, I get chills right now just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Is that special?
Yeah. Yeah, this one, I don't remember right now what it's called, but this gorge there is just fabulous, fabulous. And the last time, once I went, it was actually during COVID, and there was hardly anybody there. That was very special.
Special, yeah. COVID did have its sort of fringe benefits.
Oh, it did lots. Okay, I mean, it was no fun, and lots of people lost their lives. But I think, especially here, and that was one thing also here in Cyprus, because we have a house, we have a garden. We didn't really feel very, very but I have to tell you something. You have to come to Cyprus because everything that you like. You mentioned Neolithic. We have a Neolithic village which is about 20 minutes from here. Everybody, every culture has been in Cyprus. Romans, Greeks, Assyrians, anything you keep. This would be a place for you to visit.
It's surprising I haven't been there yet. I'm not, because clearly it's on the list and all that part of the world. There's so many places to go, as you know, it's a long bloody list that we have. But I mean, I've heard some people have gone to Cyprus, and it's sort of, I wouldn't say it's undiscovered by tourism, but I know that it's not the first destination, which are the places that I like. I
Yeah.
don't need big touristy bits where it's a bunch of expats speaking, with American or British accents. I just kind of like to get lost a bit.
Yes. Oh, I agree. Yeah, that of course. I mean, Cyprus is very modern compared to many other countries in this area. Egypt. Tell me about Egypt. What's your favorite place in Egypt?
Boy, that's a tough one because all of Egypt is particularly special. That was my first time that, when I was just discovering my joy of the ancient world, to be in Egypt, to be standing in front of the pyramids and to be standing in front of the Valley of the Kings was amazing. I think the most out-of-body experience, the strangest thing I've ever seen in all my travels of all the ruins, and that includes, Stonehenge and things that don't make any sense, is a site called the Serapeum. It's in Saqqara, which is just south of the Giza Plateau. Are you familiar with Saqqara?
I am. I used to do tours in Egypt when I was a tour guide. Yeah, yeah.
The Serapeum?
I do.
And to explain it to your guest, it's just so bloody weird, is it not? It is this underground chamber that is vast and is all for apis bulls. It is nothing but these enormous rows of tomb after tomb after tomb, the size of bulls, where all these mummified bulls were kept because they were sacred by the Egyptians. And it goes on forever. And I remember walking around there thinking, how did humanity get to this point? All the craft and all the things that went into Egypt, it's just so beautifully an other world. And I think I like that because, I love the plateau and the Valley of the Kings and all those gorgeous things, Thebes. But the Serapeum, I think, speaks to my endless fascination with the ancient world, because I'm always trying to figure out just what the hell were they doing? What did they know that we didn't? And I'm not talking about any kind of mystical level. I'm not particularly a spiritual person. I mean, like, how did the crossroads of the culture get to them? They created this massive underground tomb for bulls that remained hidden for 3,000 years and found again. It reminds me that we've come so far in history, we'll never understand the past in the way we want to, because it's just an aberration. It makes no sense to us, but to them, it made perfect sense.
It did, and there are so many places that when you also look at those constructions or those buildings or those monuments, and you think, how did they do this? How?
The reason I was able to sell the first film, Saving the Sphinx, it was about the restoration, but at that time, there was a big documentary that just come out with Charlton Heston, played Moses in the Ten Commandments. There was a big hit on NBC called Missy's the Sphinx or something. This is 96, 97. And the theory was that because of what you said, the Sphinx and the pyramids are so overwhelmingly intricate and the engineering is so precise, it couldn't have been done by humans. It had to have been done by aliens that came down and created this culture. And the Sphinx was the remnant of some long lost culture made by aliens that then the Egyptians, we silly little humans, came along and emulated. And it was all bullshit. And it was all based on, circular facts and stuff. But the archaeologists who were in charge of it were so annoyed that this show was so big that I came there and they kind of used me as a way. Okay, we'll show you about the restoration of the Sphinx, but you got to let us speak to why we know this is made by humans and not by aliens. So that became part of my thing. But it helped indoctrinate me very early on, where it's more fascinating to think this was done by human hands than it was by something paranormal or special. The fact that humans got to a point so many times in culture where they created these wonderful things, that to me, that's more mysterious and fascinating than an easy answer where it came from some sort of other culture that did it in the blink of an eye.
Yeah, very true. Now, talking about documentary filmmaking, how does it work? Do you go and make a documentary and then you sell it to a channel, or are you on a contract and the channel tells you to go?
Usually, I mean, in most cases, the latter, because of the money. And I've done both. I've been 25 years in television. For the first 11 years, I was the person who made the shows. And I was the guy who went there, was hired to go to the field. And then I became an executive producer for first National Geographic and then Discovery. And what that means is I'm the network representative. I don't go in the field, but I oversee the shows that do. So I give them the notes, I read the scripts, I approve the budgets, and then somebody else goes to them and I'm their boss at the network and I make sure it's ready for Discovery Channel Eyes or whatever. So I've done both sides of it. But like I did a Sphinx, not knowing I could sell it. That was 1897. That was a very different world. That doesn't happen too often because you need so much money to make the thing. So it's very rare where filmmakers will go off and complete a film and then try to sell it because there's no guarantee you will. Then you're out $500,000 or whatever. So usually what happens is a network. When I was the network Discovery Channel, the Science Channel, we did all the archaeology shows. People would pitch us an idea. They'd come to us with a sizzle tape, which was 10 minutes, often just archive the mysteries of Iran. And they would show images. And if we liked it, then we would fund the documentary. And then we would approve the budget and send them in the field. And then they would report back to me and I would look at footage and that kind of stuff because it's too much of a risk anymore to spend that money and then you're sitting on it. It's not like a novel. I'm writing novels now where it's just me in a corner typing away. That's a lot cheaper to do. If I don't sell it, the only thing is lost is time.
Yeah, that's my next, that's going to be talking about the novels. Primetime Traveler.
Yeah, that's my first novel. And that's something, I've been very much at a crossroads the last couple of years because I lost my job at Discovery Channel last year through a big merger. Television, and particularly factual entertainment that I make, this is the US and the UK, I work for both, is really dying. The streaming services, Discovery Channel merged with Warner Brothers and HBO. So they have less content, less people that are being made. They're afraid to take risks. So everything is shrinking. And my channel, the Science Channel, went away completely last year. And that means that me and 30 of my other colleagues on that channel alone were out of a job. But the timing was perfect because I was ready to tell stories in a different way. And after 25 years of nonfiction and being in the field, I wanted to play around a bit and kind of take all my experience as a traveler and a TV producer and make something as fantastical. So Primetime Travelers is exactly that. It's the first of a series where it's about a TV crew in Egypt. My other favorite place, Abydos. If you haven't been to Abydos in Middle Egypt.
Yes, I have.
Oh,
yes.
That might be my favorite. Serapeum is the strangest. It's sort of a lightweight time travel parody, though it has real drama and human emotion in it. But it's a cheesy TV crew, like so many I worked with, that were in over their heads, and they were able to go back into ancient Egypt to tell the documentary of a lifetime. And of course, they realize their lives are really at stake. So it is this film crew, this feckless film crew that travels the ancient world, and they're the 12 hours of the Duat, the 12 hours of the Egyptian underworld, to try to find a lost mummy. And I'm gay, and one of the things that really informed me coming over my years was coming out gay and also seeing how homosexuality was embraced around the world or not embraced. And the ancient world in Egypt and Rome and very much in those cultures, it was nothing. It was very much about you love whoever you want. So all my books that I'm writing also have this LGBTQ love story, but also it's about a film crew that time travels. And that one is out already on Amazon. And then the second one, Primetime Pompeii, will come out in September. So I went to the Bay of Naples for a month during my severance, did my nice severance at Discovery Channel on their dime. And I wrote the second novel, which is about the film crew coming back. And now they go back to Pompeii to make a documentary before it explodes. So, and the third one I'm writing, which I'm going to Troy, is about primetime Troy.
Wow.
So they go back.
So Pompeii is written. That's for coming out.
Pompeii's done.
Yeah.
Pompeii is done. It'll be out probably in September. I was just talking to my book cover designer this morning about finalizing the book cover.
So for everyone who is listening to us, I'm going to put the website and the Amazon link in the show notes, so you can order Neil's books. You can order one book at the moment, and then you can pre-order maybe the Primetime Traveler Pompeii.
Exactly, and if you join my mailing list or go to my website, and I'll let you know when the next book comes out, because I'm gonna get these books out quickly because I want to build the audience, and there's the film crew. Each one's a different adventure and self-contained, so you don't have to read each one to understand the next one. But it very much is about this 4-person crew who time travels. And what it's done for me, it's wonderful to tell these stories and kind of mess with history. And that's the headline for the blurb for the first book is messing up history, one episode at a time.
So it's kind of history, entertainment, and history combined.
Precisely. It's got your Indiana Jones adventure, but I mean, I do my research. So if you pick up and you want to know about the 12 hours of the Egyptian duat, it's in everything in there. I talked to my friends, Egyptologists, they vetted it. Pompeii, what most people don't know about Pompeii explosion, it took about 48 hours for Pompeii to be buried. And a lot of different things happened during then. First, the pumice stones came, and then the earthquakes, and then the fires. So I wove in the tapestry of those last 48 hours of Pompeii in my book, while my film crew is trying to make a documentary with drones, over. So the comedic thing is a modern sensibility thrown against a true ancient background.
Amazing.
It makes it fun because I can totally make stuff up, but it's still grounded in what I love about history, which is the truth and trying to understand, get people excited about these places. Hopefully, if someone reads Primetime Travelers, they'll want to go to Abydos. That's where the book takes place, in Abydos. That's the portal. So if you love Abydos, then you might like the book too, because it all takes place at the Temple of Seti. That is the way they travel to the past. And then Pompeii, I just got and as a writer, I rented a little villa, an Airbnb, a few miles from Pompeii near Sorrento. And I would get up in the morning and I'd write until midday. And then I'd get on the train and go to Pompeii and wander around and look at the ruins and then take notes. And then I'd write that in the book the next day. So I really was kind of flying by the seat of my pants, not much different than I was in, the Turkish border, trying to make stuff up as I went along. I'm not one of those guys that can outline stuff and figure it out when I write. I just kind of plunge into it. And by being there, by walking around Troy in a month or two, and then going back and writing about Achilles will make it all the more vivid, I think, for me, because I want to experience in words what I just experienced in the field.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I'm sure you're going to have a good time. Now, you have, apart from the Middle East, you have been to 70 countries. Mm-hmm. What, apart from the Middle East, what other area of the world do you like very much?
I love Southeast Asia. I'm a big fan of Southeast Asia. I just think that the Indonesia is an amazing place. I'm often drawn to the places that do have the cultural artifacts. I'm much more drawn to places that have the remnants of culture rather than the great outdoors. New Zealand is lovely, but it's not high on my list because it's mountains and streets. I love it, but I want to see those ancient ruins of Bagan, or I want to wander through Angkor Wat and just see the sun rising over the temples. Those are the things that transport me. So I think, Southeast Asia, the Mediterranean is particularly beautiful. I love the Mayan world. Chile and Peru are two of my favorite places that I keep going back and back to because the people are so friendly, and the sun dappling on the ruins just makes my heart pitter patter.
Beautiful. It's a big, big world out there. And you and I have traveled to, I don't know, together to over 150 countries. But for somebody who listens, because I think sometimes people are a little overwhelmed when they listen to people like us, because we've been everywhere and we know everything. But what would you tell somebody to start with? I'm in a group on Facebook, which is like women over 50 traveling solo. And some of those people have never left the US, for example. What would you say is like the step one, lesson one? Where would you go?
I would go wherever you feel moved, and don't worry about the newspapers. Obviously, you don't want to go to like Dominican Republic right now or North Korea. There's certain places that are definitely no-goes. But so many people have told me, I'd love to go to Egypt, but it's just not safe. I'm going to wait till it's safe. Well, it's never going to be bloody well safe in that way. There's always going to be Egypt. Yet I have never, ever, I feel more danger in East New York than I do in the back streets of Cairo. So if you wait until things are perfect, you have missed a golden opportunity to see the world. And it's okay to be a little bit afraid. It's okay. Like if you're not sure, if you don't, India is a tough place. Don't make India your first destination. And maybe if you go to Egypt, take a tour group. Tour groups don't have to be a bad word. Obviously, you were one, They can be very, very cocooning. But my first trip to Egypt was with a tour group in 1991 or whatever. And then I branched off and traveled on my own for 2 months because I found that voice. I found that energy. But my first thing would be, whatever country you think a lot about, do it now. Don't wait, because you don't know where you're going to be a year from now. And don't worry about what everybody says. Oh, it's going to be better next year, or the government isn't stable, or the roads are crap, and it's monsoon season. You better wait. Clearly there are dangers when you go there. But you've been to 100 some countries. I've been to 70. I've had a few small run-ins, but nothing that I felt like, oh, this was stupid coming here. So I would say don't wait. And I would say whatever that place is that you've always had that little inkling about, that's your first place. And if that's Egypt or India, then find a way to do it. If it's Montana, is it baby steps? Then go to Montana. But do it. Because as you know, the more you do it, the more it becomes demystified, the more fun it is. And you scratch that itch that you can never get rid of. So you just have to take that first step.
That is so true. Everything you just said just really, really is so close to my heart, especially all this propaganda and, talking about places that they are not. And what you say, I have traveled to so many countries, and the only place that something was ever stolen from me was on the Chapel Bridge in Lucerne, in my hometown. Somebody took an envelope out of my blazer jacket because I had just done a tour. I have never really felt scared. I mean, of course, but that was fun. When you look back, I look back at my life and I think it's pure coincidence that I'm alive. But
right.
At the time when you do it, it's fun and it's exciting. And you don't want to look back when you are sitting in that chair when you are 85 and think, oh, I should have gone. It's exactly like you said, just go.
I was just at a family reunion last week back in Pittsburgh. And, I'm 57 and I have cousins that are even older. And they say, oh, I wish I would have done what you did. I would have liked to have seen the pyramids. I would have loved to see Angkor Wat. And I'm saying, well, Judy, you're only 59. What's stopping you from doing it now? It's like they suddenly think that there's a cutoff limit, and you can, as long as you're ambulatory, you can do these things, or you figure out you have somebody do it for you. Take a bus if you don't want to walk. But don't overthink it. Just do it, because I guarantee you, as you just said, it can change your life at 59 as easily as it can when you're 19.
Oh yes, but once the travel bug bites, then it's very, very difficult to get rid of, isn't it?
It's in your blood forever.
Yes, I think it is. And for me, this is, it's the most important for me is to stay physically well so I can go.
Right. Exactly. As my husband is 9 years younger, but, as I consider retirement, we're talking about where do we retire? And we know we want to retire in the Eastern Mediterranean or somewhere there because we don't want to stop traveling. We say, well, if we retire in Italy or retire in Greece, then we can be in Cairo in 2 hours and we can be in Amman in 2 hours, like where you are. I don't want to ever give that up. As long as I'm physically able, I do not want to disappear into some sort of suburban hellscape and then to say the best years are behind me.
The words exactly, definitely. Now, Cyprus would be a good place to retire. We have very good medical care. We're an hour away from Cairo, 20 minutes from Beirut.
I gotta dig deeper. Now I feel like, the ignorant guy that did my homework. I should have looked at Cyprus by now, too. It could be my 71st country.
And now you know somebody there, too.
Well, you'll be careful, because I am one of those people who say, stop by. I ring the bloody bell and you'll see me. I'll be standing there with a bottle of wine saying, can I come in? So be careful what you ask.
Most welcome. Now we're getting to the end, and I have really, really enjoyed talking to you. We could have talked about a lot more, but I think it's more about, the essence. And I think the message really is, apart from, talking about the Middle East and all these beautiful places, is telling people to go. And as a documentary filmmaker, I mean, you make those films and people watch them on television, and I'm sure they are beautiful, but it's not the same.
It is not the same. And then even those, I mean, I got my love of Egypt maybe watching a documentary about, National Geographic when I was 15 or whatever. I don't know where they're seats. So that's why I love doing what I did, making the films, because if I can get you out of your seat through a documentary that shows some beautiful images over Machu Picchu, then, at least I have laid the seed. But you're right. It is not the same thing as watching a documentary or going to Epcot Center and saying, I saw 4 European countries in an afternoon. You have to scratch a bit deeper. And I promise, like, I imagine most people listening to this probably are already drank the same Kool-Aid as us, and they travel, they want to travel, they already have traveled. But those who have not, it is never too late, and it can change your life in profound ways. It has changed mine, both first as a filmmaker and now as a novelist. None of those things would have happened if it wasn't for travel.
Beautiful. I think we're going to just leave it at that. And I want to thank you so much for being on Most Memorable Journeys today, Neil Laird.
It was a great pleasure. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel.
You will find all the information in the show notes.